So, have all of you gotten enough rest recently? Good. I didn't have to ask all my follow-up questions to pry it out of you. I imagine all of you have gotten your daily 8 hours of sleep. You take adequate breaks throughout your day. You rest up, drink plenty of fluids. All of that, right? We're all very good at being restful people. Right. That's what I thought. I imagine all of us can keenly remember the last time we were on vacation and have plans to go on a new one. Friends, it is indeed troublesome because in our modern day and age, rest is not always something that's advocated or even advantageous in our environments. It's difficult, but it's so necessary because we can burn out like that if we just keep going and push ourselves beyond any and all breaking points. And so today we are going to look at Scripture, especially in this season of summer where we're kind of reminded of those good things like going down the shore, going up to the mountains, finding a time away from the busyness and the to-dos, or even having those staycations, as they're called, staying at home but with a different intention than just cleaning the house and doing laundry and catching up on those dust bunny colonies that are developing in corners. For indeed, friends, God designed and made us to both work and rest, not one at the exception of the other. And so today, instead of trying to do it all by our own power, our own strength and fortitude of mind, I invite us to rest in the Lord, to take these moments and to hear these encouragements about what God has offered us, to refresh our bodies and souls alike. So friends, let's dive into God's Word today and see what He has in store for us. So as we read, today we have two readings from the Psalms, but very different in what they're presenting. The first one, though only 2 verses that we read today, really speaks of the profound impact of God's involvement in any enterprise. Here the psalmist begins by saying, "If the Lord does not build the house, the work of the builders is useless. It's in vain." It's something deep in our Jewish brothers' faith that if God wasn't in it, if God wasn't for it, then all human effort seemingly is wasted on it. They continue with a more militaristic approach by saying if it's useless for the sentries to keep guard and watch over the city they protect if God Himself does not protect the city first. It's rather interesting, folks, how important God is in making sure things are safe or good or productive. And so as we hear these words today, think about how that applies to our own work and activity. For you can probably ask yourself, Pastor, this doesn't seem to be all that restful. It doesn't have any word that links to rest here. It's all about doing things and it being in vain without God. What does that have to do with rest? I think it has to do with our perspective on rest and where God is in the midst of it. And so, a couple brief slides to get us open to what perspective is all about. So I imagine all of us, after working or doing some labor, come home and find our comfy chair. It may not be a chair, it might be a couch, it might be any type of piece of furniture. But I thought, hey, I imagine we come back and we find some rest in these fabric or leather furnishings. Maybe it's with this. We come home and after having to commit our minds to something or our bodies to work all day long, we find a chance to watch some television and get lost in just something mundane and something we don't have to contribute to. For others, maybe it's getting away and getting wrapped up in a good story, getting lost in a world unlike our own, and getting to relax. Now, this last image we're going to stay on for a moment. Thank you. There we go. We're going to stay on this one a little while because here's the thing about those images. Here with these images before us, we saw a recliner, we saw a TV, presumably with a person sitting on a couch or recliner as well, and then hear this book down by the seashore. Friends, it's interesting because you can do all of these activities and not rest, right? I mean, probably every day you have an occasion to sit. I doubt all of us work in such jobs or do so much work that we never touch down. Our feet never are lifted off the ground for 24 hours. I imagine that happens every once in a grand while, but I imagine all of us grab a seat at least once every day. But sometimes it's not restful. Despite having the opportunity to kick our feet up or watch some television or get caught up in a good book, we may not be resting because it's a matter of where our mind and intention is in that rest. Because how many of you, when you go down the shore, reading is different? Or when you're off and you don't have to report to work, sitting on the couch and watching TV is different. Those are the same activities, right? I mean, it's the same place, in the same house, the same furnishings, the same book even. But when you're on vacation, when you don't have to be somewhere, you rest. It's a difference of perspective, which I think the psalmist is trying to hint at here. That if God isn't in it, then all the rest, all the labors, all the work, all the late nights and early mornings, as is said here, don't amount to much. It's a chance to get away. Rest is the opportunity to let the work be meaningful and to come back to it with a fresh perspective. And so, friends, here at the very onset, if we have a fresh perspective, if we take an opportunity to give ourselves permission to rest, to grab a seat on that recliner and not just be that needed recharge, but an enjoyed recharge, then we begin to tap into God and us resting together. But there's another psalm reading that we will look at here today. This one, a thanksgiving for the opportunity that God is giving to rest. Here the psalmist is pleased that God hears his cries for help, hears his sighing over the difficulties of life, but celebrates that when I pray to you, O Lord, you hear my voice in the morning, and at sunrise I offer my prayer and wait for your answer. There's a key word in there, wait. I know we live in an instantaneous generation, folks. We like things happening now. You can Google search all of the things we're talking about and get immediate access to a wealth of information, but waiting is a key part of resting. Because resting is not grabbing a seat in a recliner and saying, all right, I've rested, now back to it. Like 1 second rest and you're back into it, right? Sometimes you gotta let yourself, you gotta wait to relax. To rest with God, to buy into this rest that God is offering. Sometimes we gotta wait for it. Sometimes even as we sit here and worship and pray, sometimes it's good for us to pause, to realize God is here along with us. The psalmist continues when he says, because of your great love, I can come into your house. Again, to pause to understand what that means. It's not, I can come into your house, Lord, because I'm worthy. I've achieved and done enough work for you that I can come in. I'm important enough. I'm cool enough. I'm knowledgeable enough to come into the house of God. No, all of those qualifications don't mean much because, as it says, it's all because of God's great love that all of us, the doors are thrown open to God's house. And here in the psalmist, he writes that he can worship in God's holy temple and bow down in reverence, all at the behest of God's great love. And that's something that is truly restful, folks. You don't have to work to enter the house of God. The doors are already open, and God's already thrown open his arms to receive us because he's been waiting for that moment. When the psalmist writes he bows down in reverence, I think it is not just a matter of formality. It's not about forced subjugation. It's all about this fervent, deep desire to be in worship and to be in communion with God. Because I don't hear that as work. I hear that as restful. Because you're needed at your job. You have family obligations. You have many things you have to do in life. But this is one of those things you choose to do. God's not going to come down from heaven and push you to the ground and say, all right, bow down and be reverent for a moment. This we offer to God. And this, as I hear it from the psalmist writings, is all about he wanted to do it. He bows down in reverence because it's refreshing and a desire of the heart, not a requirement, but something that's wanted to happen. And so, friends, as we hear this, God has invited us to rest, to come into God's house and to be part of this loving community. And here you can find rest for your souls. As Christ came to earth to be our living word from God, so Christ brought us a lot of teaching, and even some on rest. Here in probably a very familiar passage about Christ and the yoke he offers us. If you're unfamiliar with what a yoke is, it's kind of important, because otherwise you're not sure what Christ is offering here. For if Christ is here to offer true and lasting rest, because he opens with that. Come to me, all of you who are tired from carrying heavy loads, and I will give you rest. Again, the little nuanced words here mean a lot. Come to me, all of you. Not just those of you who have time to come to Christ and have rest, because that's kind of the point. It's about coming when you're in need of rest, not when your schedule allows it. Because trust me, if you're waiting for a free moment to find rest, it may not come. Christ invites us to take his yoke and to put it on ourselves. As you see up here, this is just a small rendering of what a yoke is. It's something that helps tie you to something else. Usually livestock. You can tie two animals together, and they have to work together. From the most stubborn of farm animals, they got to move as one. And that's some of the beauty of the rest that God offers. It's not just sending us in isolation to somewhere to recoup. It's about being with God and finding rest in that moment. Because when you're yoked with something or someone, you can't charge ahead, and you can't fall behind. If you do, it's just a comical spinning in a circle. That's what happens when you're yoked together and going at two different speeds. But instead, when we're yoked with Christ, when we take this light and easy load on us, the heavy loads we're carrying of the endless to-do list, what we have to get done, and the things left undone fade away, because now we march to somebody's different pace, one that lets us recover, breathe deeply, and have a moment away from the world. So friends, today is about resting. Today, as a Sabbath day, is about taking a moment off from all that you have to do all week long. And so with a different perspective, I invite us to see rest, be it a day of rest or moments of rest, because you kind of need those two. And that seeing the offer Christ and the Lord our God has put out there to come in and to be made new. Then we get to see if we accept it. To walk with God, not apart from God, but with God. To rest up, to get recharged, and to get back at it at the appointed time. So friends, rest in the Lord your God. In this moment of worship, some point today, and in all the days ahead of yourself. Thanks be to God. Amen.